This is Matthew Thomas, a journalist for TheThings, and I'm here with the Survivor legend, Hall of Famer, first Survivor winner ever, Richard Hatch, also of House of Villains and The Apprentice fame. And I wanted to talk to you, Rich, about why you think your part in the history of Survivor is diminished as much as it is.
Well, geez, Matthew, thanks for having me. And wow, you must be a really bright guy to have noticed. I think people do notice that I'm not as involved as many would still like me to be in Survivor, and that's not by choice for me. That's about behind the scenes stuff between Mark Burnett and Jeff Probst and me, and I think a tremendous unfairness and real irresponsibility on their part from the beginning with respect to who I am and what I did and what happened to me as a result of being a gay atheist openly on that show. The legal system that we have just is broken, and they know or are in a position of power such that they should have learned how abused I've been, and they've done nothing about it, and they could. So that's my short, very, very short answer for why I'm still kind of detached from Survivor.
Yeah.
You probably know I was invited back for Winners at War.
Yep.
And two days before shooting, they dropped Tina and me. And I think that was Probst's decision. At least that's what I was told. He's never resolved any of the issues that he's really done horribly wrong with respect to my life, even from the Sue Hawk incident, which was 100% Probst's fault. He misread it, he miscommunicated about it, and he never corrected any of his mistakes and left it as a cliffhanger when that incident actually never occurred. That was made up by production.
If you go back, though, and you think about like that first season of Survivor, like if you ask me, the current seasons of Survivor still basically are built on what you did right back from the beginning, from like the alliances being built and the people wanting to be the glue and all the things that you did. So how, like, if you think back to what that first season, how was it for you to get people to kind of go along with your wanting to make the game more strategic? Because I do remember that when you were playing the first time that you initially suggested the idea of creating like an alliance or a voting block, and the people were not receptive at all to it. So when you think back to that, like how did you feel about it at the time?
Well, I had decided what I needed to do to win long before I even got to the island. So my thoughts around what it would take to win a game that I understood very little, but as much as I understood from what they told us before we went in, included having to build alliances and move through a gauntlet. And I did find it difficult, but I didn't give up on it. What I did was just made people a part of my alliance when I needed them to be, even if they either didn't know they were part of the alliance or were against being part of alliance, just hoping that eventually they would come around. And they did. It took a lot of work, but Rudy, for example, just thought it was unethical. And it took him many, many weeks. Oh, many. I don't know how long. I can't remember now.
It's been a long time.
It took him a long time before he went along with the idea, even though he was part of the alliance from the get-go. He was my first alliance member. I just knew I could rely on him. And so I trusted that I would be able to help him understand it before it was too late. And eventually we did.
Do you still watch Survivor to this day, or no?
I've never missed an episode. It's a great, great game. I mean, I'm tremendously disappointed in much of what's happened to it. And much of that has to do with, again, people think I hate the guy, but it's not true. But I do think that Probst misses much of what he could learn about the actual game. Even though he's a host, I don't think he gets it as well as he should. And were he to drop his ego and reach out to someone who understood it before he even played it, and then played it as well as I did, he wouldn't have done some of the things that he's doing now to confuse viewers and participants and to take away from the game of Survivor and from what viewers come to Survivor to watch. Viewers come to be more introspective. They don't even know it, maybe, but they come to learn about who these participants are, compare them to who they are, which then makes them have to think about themselves and decide how they would approach or not approach or do it differently. Or it's a really powerful connection that is made with many, many Survivor viewers. And unfortunately, a lot of the gimmicks and twists that Probst has tried since becoming executive producer are pretty easy to see that they would be not just ineffective, but off-putting to a large viewership. So it bothers me that there isn't more thought put into a game that's such a great social opportunity for we viewers who don't have a lot of opportunity to engage in the way that we can with this kind of a game.
So do you feel like it's even possible for someone like a Jeff Probst or a fan who's watching it at home to ever actually fully understand the game, having never actually played it themselves, even though Jeff obviously is there, he's not playing?
Yeah, so it depends on the individual, and I don't think it's impossible to understand the game. It's impossible to get some of the incredibly important subtleties that you can only almost feel as they're happening when you move through the game. The winner has to be more adaptable than anyone almost can plan to be. You can only learn what that need is when you're in the midst of it. And it's something I think if people were interested, we could talk and pull apart and prepare. And frankly, there are participants, maybe even some who are on the show right now this season, with whom I have spent some time and talked about the game. And so I feel like, behind the scenes, I am contributing to individuals' games and to the game itself. And it's fun.
So like, are you just talking like general strategy with these people, like going back to how you did it back then, or just?
So let me stop you there, because that's a really, really, really interesting point. How you did it back then. Yeah. I'm constantly bombarded by, well, there's been a big shift. I was a villain for a decade, just for a long, long time. People didn't understand the game, etc. Most people still don't understand the game. But come COVID, millions, thousands, millions, I don't know how many, huge numbers of viewers rewatched or watched brand new. And a whole wave of communication came at me that was more positive than I could describe. It was positive in the beginning, but this was, why were they thinking you were a villain? Holy crap, how did you know what was going on? People are getting it more in greater numbers now, more recently, and that's nice. So with that, there are people who reach out to me and who engage with me. And depending on the individual, we've gotten pretty specific. It isn't about old school. This is the point I wanted to get to. Old school versus new school, as if they're two different games. That's horse shit. Sorry. That's hogwash. And it's just not reflective of the actual game of Survivor. It's marketing. It's the way Probst tries to make the game something it isn't, socially appropriate for him and for CBS, as opposed to letting people be who we are and then using this beautiful game of Survivor to have real conversations later instead of him inserting himself into the game. So there isn't an old school and a new school. There's the way you play Survivor. And just as I had to adapt, intensely focused, adapt in the original game, I would have to do the same thing playing again. And it's not about whether or not, what would I be if I were to play now? A new school player or just an old school player playing in the new seat? It's stupid. It's really, really dumb to make that distinction. There isn't a different way to play. There are different moves, different thoughts, different approaches that have to be taken with different individuals, with different times, with different challenges, with different tests that come up that you face while you're playing the game. That's the mark of a winner, the adaptability. It doesn't matter whether it happened in the early seasons or tomorrow. It's about being open to focus and adapt.
I mean, that absolutely proves my point about why I think you deserve so much more credit for creating the game that we have now. Because, like I said, so many of the things that players still do to this day are things that you did during that first season, from like going and wanting to be the provider. So you had that value, and creating these alliances and being the glue, so that all, like, you had this alliance, but you were the glue between everybody else, so that you couldn't really be replaced that way, and being willing to go after Kelly and all that all of that is still what we see in Survivor today, putting aside all of the advantages that come up. So that's, like, I find it fascinating that you say that, because yeah, I do think to a large degree it's still pretty much the same game.
So to tie this to an earlier question, the subtleties involved, I can help you understand by what you just said then. Provider, becoming the provider. Yep. So it's not as simple as deciding to provide because that'll make them want me to stay. It's deciding I can benefit from providing them some food, but then thinking about how much and when, and should I hold back? And should I hold back even more? And should I make them a little bit angry at me so that they're not concerned about me, my gameplay, or thinking that I'm trying to suck up to. It's a very, very complex game. And unfortunately, Probst and others talk about it in these very superficial, only observable from the outside, even if you are sitting there at tribal council or just watching the dailies and think you're getting it. You are getting inside the player. And what Probst has done again, everybody's going to feel like I'm beating up on him just because I personally dislike him. And that's just not the case. But I am beating up on him because of what I know he's doing to the game. His removal or reduction, sometimes to such a significant extent, you don't even know who the people are, of the internal, of what's really going on in the players, and giving us time to focus on the psychological stresses, the interactions, now to the point where I think they may be exploiting mental illness in some cases. And that's just, I mean, it's beyond sad for me. It's missing the point. It takes away from we viewers being able to really enjoy whatever's happening to whomever's playing, because that's life and it's just a game, and whatever happens to you happens. We're distracted sometimes because we think, oh God, was this fair that this person was cast? And what's going to happen to this person when the game ends? That's what casting was supposed to do. And unfortunately, I think Probst is too involved in that, at least from my sources. And I could be wrong, but that's who is driving most of what has been going wrong with the show. And unfortunately, it can be done so much better if someone were focused on what it really takes to play well, and bringing in players who play better and better and better. The stakes would be raised. The game would be even more fascinating. So be it.
How do you feel about, like, the fact that, like, your legacy in Survivor has been diminished so much by the show itself?
Well, you could probably tell how frustrating it is for me to have that happen, but it's not my show. It's not my game. It's just a game I played. And I'm only coming at this from someone who loves the game, yep, who understands it really, really well, and wants the best for the game and for the participants who come. So I'm not, I think I'm very self-aware, and this is not my life. My life has its own struggles and its own complications. But when I have an opportunity to talk to someone who seems to understand the game a little bit and is interested in it, I'm able to talk very, very specifically about what I truly, honestly believe about Survivor and how it's unfolded. So that's what you're getting. But is it something I spend my time, worrying about and stressing about? No, there are many, many other things that make it into that space in my life besides Survivor.
Well, I mean, I've seen you do interviews in the past where you've been talking about Survivor, and you always seem to have a very good, like, sense of humor about it. And so, yeah, I mean, I do think that absolutely comes across. But I just was curious because it like, I do that. You can tell that your passion for the game comes through, especially not only when you're talking about like your own legacy, but just in general, how you wish you could improve it.
True. Thanks. I'm glad it does. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Matthew.
So, do you feel like your survivor legacy has gotten you all these other opportunities? Do you are you trying to like reframe your reputation at all when you go on other shows like The Apprentice or House of Villains or what have you?
So no, I've never once attempted to reframe my reputation or to change who I am. The the exposure, no pun intended, I got on Survivor is what it is. You know, it's life. It was a game. It was before 54 million viewers or whatever it was, and so I have name recognition that many other people may never have, and that has impacted my life in varying ways. And when opportunities arise, I certainly take advantage of those. But Celebrity Apprentice is a different game. House of Villains is a very different game. All of the opportunities in which I've been involved, in which I participated, are different from one another. And I'm going to be both me and whatever it takes from my perspective to succeed, whether it's win or whatever, in whatever I do. So if I were to revamp my reputation or to change, or if I were to be asked, what is it that I would like people to be interested in with respect to me or to engage with, it's something more meaningful than the games. Like sports don't have any meaning for me. I get why people are drawn to Survivor, and I love that they are. Yeah. But I hope they go down the road with me of reality matters, reality being what's true. And I'm going to try and start this website or this podcast deeper, where reality matters, with Richard Hatch. So that's coming. And that's going to be about helping people get outside of their perspective that causes them to close their minds, and to challenge them to think about what's true, whether it's knowable, unknowable, or unknown. You know it, you don't know it, or it's unknowable. It's still there, whatever is true. And I hope to challenge folks around that.
Before I let you go, I just wanted to ask you one more thing about the strategy that you had, especially at the beginning. And then I completely respected the fact that when you came back to play Survivor All-Stars, you completely changed up your game in a number of ways that I thought were very interesting. But when you were playing that first season and you became this massive villain, which everybody hated, which I admit fully at the time, I was rooting against you as much as anybody possibly could. Were you aware when you were playing the game that that's how people would likely perceive you coming out of it?
Absolutely not. So I truly believed and felt great about the idea that not only was I putting into place these plans that I had, these thoughts about the game, and I was succeeding, but that I would go home to an MVP welcome. Here I am using a sports analogy. I don't even watch them, but I know that there's this most valuable player thing. Yep. I thought I'd go home and people would be like, wow, outwit, outlast, outplay. How'd you know? Wow, you really rocked it. And people really were so caught off guard by what I was willing to do within the context of those rules that they really just couldn't grasp what the actual game was about for years. Yep. Frankly, there are many players, 47 seasons in on the current season even, who don't understand this is a game. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but there's a person who was voted off the island last night who was stompy and angry and then cried on the way out. There's a sadness from my perspective when folks can't grasp the game enough to play it well. And you can't tell me that there aren't enough citizens to choose from to cast people who can play the game instead of be so lost in it by their emotions. So it must be intentional on casting's part, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and we really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.